This is the image they told us would never exist. For more than a decade, Donald Trump has been the ultimate Teflon figure. Impeachments slid right off. Indictments only boosted his poll numbers. Civil judgments were delayed, appealed, or neutralized with bonds. He appeared to live in a separate reality, one where consequences applied to everyone else. But this morning, Saturday, January 24th, 2026, the Teflon finally melted. Breaking news out of New York City has thrown the American presidency into total chaos. A New York State Supreme Court justice has issued an order for the immediate execution of judgment against the Trump Organization. This is not a warning. This is not a threat. This is a seizure order. Right now, the New York City Sheriff's Office, the agency tasked with enforcing civil judgments, is reportedly preparing to serve foreclosure notices on some of the most recognizable properties in the Trump empire. We're talking about 40 Wall Street. We're talking about Trump Tower's commercial spaces. There are even reports that the private jet could be involved. So why now? Why while he's sitting in the Oval Office? Because the financial contagion we discussed yesterday, the Japanese bond market crash, has just claimed its first high-profile casualty, the bonding agency that was securing Trump's massive civil fraud appeal. A liquidity crisis in Tokyo triggered a margin call in New York. The insurer pulled the bond. Trump, already cash-strained by his campaign and ongoing legal battles, couldn't replace it within the court's 24-hour emergency window. The stay is gone. The shield is down. For the first time in American history, a sitting president is facing the active liquidation of his private business empire by a hostile state government. The Secret Service is now reportedly in a standoff with local law enforcement over access to these buildings. The White House counsel's office is pushing urgently for Supreme Court intervention. And the president is said to be furious, even threatening to federalize the National Guard to protect his property. We are watching capitalism, the Constitution, and a financial crash collide in real time. In this special report, we're going to break down exactly how this happened. We'll examine which assets are now on the chopping block. We'll explain why the shock from Japan made this outcome unavoidable. And we'll answer the question no one ever expected to ask. Can New York State actually evict the President of the United States from his own tower? Buckle up. History is unfolding right now. To understand why the sheriff is moving today, we need to look at the financial plumbing that failed overnight. Remember the $464 million civil fraud judgment from 2024, brought by New York Attorney General Letitia James? Trump appealed it. To stop his assets from being seized while that appeal played out, he had to post a bond. A small surety firm stepped in, vouched for him, and guaranteed the judgment. For 2 years, that bond held. It was the dam keeping the floodwaters back. Then yesterday, the global financial system convulsed. The Japanese bond market collapsed. The yen carry trade unwound. Trillions of dollars in liquidity vanished from the global banking system in a matter of hours. According to leaked reports cited by the Wall Street Journal, the reinsurance consortium backing Trump's appeal bond was heavily exposed to Japanese commercial debt. When Tokyo cracked, their balance sheet imploded late Friday night. Either regulators or the firm's own risk committee forced a rapid de-risking. They informed the New York court that they could no longer secure Trump's judgment. The bond was withdrawn. Normally, a defendant might get 30 days to secure a replacement. But this is New York. This is Letitia James. And this is a judge who has run out of patience. The court ruled that given the fragile state of the defendant's liquidity and the broader global instability, no grace period would be granted. The logic was ruthless. If the president is truly a billionaire, he can write a check. If he can't write a check, the assets must be locked down immediately before they lose value in a crashing market. The order was signed at 9 a.m., immediate seizure. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, effectively received a margin call on his life's work, and he couldn't meet it. So what does Letitia James go after? She doesn't want the golf courses. They're difficult to sell, often unprofitable, and packed with legal headaches. She wants cash flow. She wants trophy assets. Target 140 Wall Street, the Trump Building. This is the crown jewel, a massive skyscraper in the heart of the financial district. But there's a catch. Trump doesn't own the land. He owns the ground lease. Ground leases are fragile. Default on debt or judgments, and they can be terminated or sold. Taking 40 Wall Street hits Trump at the core of his New York identity. It's valuable, relatively liquid, and deeply symbolic. Target 2 Trump Tower. Commercial and retail spaces. Not the penthouse yet. The lower floors, the Gucci store, the atrium, the offices. The sheriff can appoint a receiver, a court-appointed manager who takes control of the property. Picture it. A bureaucrat appointed by a Democratic attorney general walking into Trump Tower, firing Trump Organization management, and redirecting every rent check straight to New York State. Trump would still own it on paper, but he'd lose control. He'd lose the cash flow. He'd become a tenant in his own building. Target 3, 7 Springs. The Westchester estate at the center of the fraud case. Inflated valuations. Clean target. Not his residence. Pure investment property. Target 4, the bank accounts. This is the immediate kill shot. The sheriff can issue levies to every major bank in New York, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and others. Any account tied to the Trump Organization gets frozen. Funds are siphoned off to satisfy the judgment. If this hits during a Monday payroll run, employees don't get paid. Housekeepers, doormen, executives, checks bounce. That's how a company dies in 24 hours. This is where a financial crisis turns into a constitutional one. Trump Tower isn't just an office building. It is the private residence of the President of the United States. It's a hardened security zone. The Secret Service controls the perimeter, the elevators, the airspace. The New York City Sheriff is also law enforcement, holding a court order commanding him to enter and inventory assets. So what happens when the sheriff reaches the revolving doors on Fifth Avenue? Picture it. The sheriff approaches. A Secret Service agent blocks the entrance. "Sir, you cannot enter. This is a secure area protecting the National Command Authority." The sheriff responds, "I have a judicial order to seize this property." The agent replies, "Federal authority supersedes state authority. Access denied for security reasons." That's a standoff. Weapons are present, stakes are enormous, egos are massive. The Attorney General anticipated this. That's why commercial entities are likely the first targets. You don't need to enter the penthouse to seize the LLC that owns it. But the optics matter. Imagine the footage. New York State officials slapping seizure notices on the windows of the Gucci store in the lobby of the president's home. It's a public humiliation, and it's meant to provoke a response. If Trump orders the Secret Service to physically block enforcement of a lawful civil order against a commercial business, he edges into obstruction of justice territory. Trump will argue the opposite, that they're attempting to bankrupt the president, to cripple his ability to govern. A coup by financial means. Sources inside the White House describe the mood right now as nuclear. Remember this. Trump doesn't see his net worth as numbers on a balance sheet. He sees it as his identity. His buildings aren't assets to him. They're his legacy, his children. So in his mind, this isn't a legal fight. It's a personal assault. According to people close to the situation, he's been on the phone nonstop with his newly installed attorney general, whoever survived the recent internal purges, demanding immediate intervention. He wants the Department of Justice to step in and file an emergency injunction in federal court. The argument is radical, that a sitting president is immune from civil asset seizure. This is uncharted legal territory. The Supreme Court ruled in Clinton versus Jones that a president can be sued civilly. But this goes further. Can a president be effectively evicted? Can his private business empire be liquidated while he's running the country? The legal pitch will center on distraction. Your Honor, the president cannot negotiate a Greenland treaty or stabilize a global financial crisis if he's worrying about his furniture being auctioned online. This, they'll argue, places an unconstitutional burden on the executive branch. It's the unitary executive theory pushed to its financial extreme. The claim is that Trump's personal finances and the national interest are inseparable, that his attention is a strategic asset, and therefore his wallet is functionally tied to the Treasury. But the Japan crash destroys the optics of that argument. Americans are watching their retirement accounts slide. They're feeling inflation. They're anxious. If the president stands up and says, "Stop everything, save my properties," it looks catastrophic. Politically, it's suicidal. This ties directly back to the wipeout polling. If Trump uses presidential power to protect his fortune while ordinary Americans are hurting, he loses the populist mantle forever. Normally, when a billionaire hits a liquidity crunch, he makes a call. A Saudi prince, a Wall Street titan, a hedge fund manager. Loan me $500 million for 6 months. I'm good for it. But today is Saturday, January 24th, 2026, and the system is frozen. Japanese banks are repatriating capital. American banks are terrified of regulatory backlash in a collapsing bond market. Oil prices are volatile, making Middle Eastern capital cautious. Trump is toxic collateral. Who wants to lend $500 million to a president at war with the courts, facing asset seizures, and potentially staring down impeachment if the midterms turn south? The risk premium is off the charts. This is why the immediate seizure order is so devastating. The judge understands the liquidity reality. The judge knows the Japan shock froze credit markets. The move was timed perfectly. Maximum pressure at maximum vulnerability. This wasn't random. It was a financial decapitation strike. Now, how does this play in Peoria? With the mega base, they see theft, they see communism, they see elites stealing his buildings. Expect protests outside Trump Tower, expect donations to legal defense funds to surge, even though, honestly, raising $464 million in $50 increments is nearly impossible. This reinforces the martyr narrative. The system is trying to destroy him, and that narrative is, well, powerful. Independence, though, this is the danger zone. Americans are drawn to winners. Wealth signals competence. Part of Trump's appeal was always, I'm rich, I can't be bought. If his buildings are seized, if he looks insolvent, if he can't even manage his own bond, that aura collapses. The question becomes unavoidable. If he can't handle his own finances, how can he run the economy? Combined with the wipeout polling and the Japan shock, this begins to look like an administration in freefall. The end of a regime. The donors already see it. The big money that backed him in 2024 is gone. Asset seizure was the final straw. No one wants their name attached to a sinking ship. The invisible primary for 2028 starts now. DeSantis, Vance, others, they're watching and thinking the same thing. He's finished, financially ruined, politically radioactive, time to move on. So how does this end? It ends at the Supreme Court. Trump's legal team will file an emergency stay with Justice Sotomayor, who oversees the Second Circuit. She'll almost certainly deny it or punt it to the full court. Then the real test arrives. A 6-3 conservative majority, his court, will have to decide whether state courts can seize the assets of a sitting president. If they step in, they risk looking like partisan protectors shielding their benefactor. If they don't, they allow the unprecedented spectacle of a president watching his empire dismantled in real time. Either way, the myth of invincibility is gone. The Teflon melted. And once that happens, power starts leaking everywhere. The legitimacy of the court, already under strain, could snap completely. If they intervene, they risk looking like political bodyguards. If they don't, they allow the leader of their own ideological camp to be publicly humiliated and financially dismantled. This is the ultimate stress test for Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. And remember, they see the polling too. They know the wipeout numbers. They may decide Trump is no longer an asset. They may decide to let New York take him. What we're watching now is the final chapter of the Trump business saga. Whether the buildings are saved or not, the damage is irreversible. The aura of invincibility is gone. The billionaire is being treated like any other foreclosure case. As Sunday approaches, watch carefully. Watch for a receiver to be appointed. Watch for bank levy notices. Watch for the Truth Social meltdown. But above all, watch the Japanese markets when they open Sunday night, U.S. time. If the financial crash deepens, Trump's personal crisis may become the least of our concerns. Still, for one man sitting in the White House, watching his name peeled off the facades of his life's work, this is the apocalypse. Trump's empire is under siege, and this time, the walls are actually giving way. Now let's get technical, because honestly, the mechanism doing the real damage here is the court-appointed receiver. Under New York law, specifically CPLR Article 52, a judge can appoint a receiver to take control of a judgment debtor's property. This isn't oversight, this is replacement. The receiver collects rents. Every tenant at 40 Wall Street gets the same letter, do not pay Trump, pay the receiver. The receiver runs operations. They decide who cleans the floors, who runs security, and who gets fired. Yes, that includes Trump family members on payroll. And if cash flow isn't enough, the receiver can sell the asset. Imagine the psychological warfare. Eric Trump or Don Jr. arrive at the office. A court-appointed lawyer, likely a neutral institutional figure, calls them into a room and says, "Turn in your keys, you're done." They can't call their father, he can't intervene. The receiver answers only to the judge. This is a hostile takeover, sanctioned by the state. The Trump Organization becomes a hollow shell, existing only to funnel money to the New York Attorney General. Because the fraud ruling pierced the corporate veil, this is legally possible. The Trump brand becomes, in effect, a tenant of New York State, and then the next domino falls. Real estate runs on debt. Trump's buildings are heavily leveraged, loans from Axos Bank and others. Most of those loans contain clauses for judgment default or bad boy guarantees. Meaning this, even if Trump is current on payments, a massive unpaid civil judgment can trigger default. Once that happens, lenders can call the loan immediately. Pay us the full balance. Now, Trump can't, so banks move to foreclose, competing with the state for what equity remains. In a Japan crash environment, banks won't hesitate. They need liquidity, loans get accelerated, assets get ripped apart. This is the domino effect of forced liquidation. One card falls and the tower collapses. Now push the scenario further. The president is consumed by this fight, distracted, paranoid, spending nearly all his time with lawyers while the global economy melts down. He's focused on Letitia James while Japan's crisis spreads. At what point does the cabinet ask whether he's compromised? The 25th Amendment sounds extreme, until it doesn't. If the president tries to use federal power to interfere with courts or seize banks to protect his accounts, that's the moment the system has to act. The conflict of interest becomes existential. Personal survival collides with constitutional order. This is exactly what the founders warned about. Why blind trusts exist, why emoluments matter, why safeguards were designed. Trump rejected all of it. Now the bill has arrived. If 40 Wall Street is sold next week, what is it worth? In 2023, maybe 200 to 300 million, optimistically. In 2026, commercial real estate is weak. Rates are rising. Everyone knows it's a forced sale. It becomes a fire sale. Blackstone, sovereign wealth funds, distressed asset vultures. We'll give you 50 million. The receiver may have no choice. Trump loses the building and still owes the judgment. This is the brutality of forced liquidation in a frozen market. Equity evaporates. Billions shrink into nothing once the liquidity discount hits. Now think geopolitically. What does Putin see? What does Xi Jinping see? They see weakness. A leader unable to protect his own property. In authoritarian systems, power is untouchable. The idea of a local judge seizing the ruler's palace is unthinkable. To them, this looks like chaos. A democracy devouring its own president. That perception emboldens rivals. If he can't stop a state attorney general, how does he deter the PLA? Power projection requires stability. A seizure notice on Trump Tower becomes a billboard advertising American instability. And remember Greenland. That deal depended on corporate confidence. CEOs are watching this unfold, watching Japan collapse, watching the president unravel. Do they commit billions or wait? Policy freezes when personal crisis dominates. The presidency stalls. And then there's the penthouse, the gold, the doors, the sanctuary. Even if it's untouched today, the threat hangs over it. Every night he sleeps there knowing it may soon belong to the state. For someone who defines himself by ownership, becoming a mental squatter is worse than prison. It explains the rage, the panic, the recklessness. He isn't just defending assets, he's defending his identity. So as we close this analysis, understand the stakes. This isn't celebrity drama, it's a stress test of the American system. Can the law touch the highest office? Can the backlash be contained if it does? Can the economy survive the collision? We are in uncharted territory. The maps don't work anymore. The sheriff is at the door, the bond market is on fire, and the president is cornered. History tells us that cornered leaders are dangerous, and the next move won't be a tweet. It will be an order, a confrontation, or an ending no one is ready for.